Well, one of the great pressing, unsettled questions of our age remains unsettled this Christmas. It is, of course, the question of whether Die Hard is a Christmas movie. So the British Board of Film Classification attempted to resolve the debate once and for all by commissioning a poll earlier this month, and the nation promptly split straight down the middle. 44% saying it's not a Christmas movie, 43% saying it is. The rest were, I don't know, or even, can you imagine, I don't care. Well, a while ago, the question was put to Bruce Willis himself, the star of the film, and his response was clear. It's not a Christmas movie because it's a Bruce Willis movie. Well, we can argue about whether that helps, but that poll is revealing because as a country, well, we can't even agree on what counts as a Christmas film. And so it's no surprise that bigger questions divide us as well. For years, the assumption of what is now the slightly older generation in this country, boomers, Generation X, even millennials, the assumption has been that Christianity is on a sure and certain decline to irrelevance and extinction. But meanwhile, something extraordinary and different appears to be happening among a younger generation, Gen Z, Gen Z, however you want to say it. Some have called it a quiet revival, a generation reviving interest in church, in spirituality and faith in Jesus. This phenomenon, if you're not familiar with it, is backed by research by YouGov for the Bible Society. It's what some of the posters outside our church have been about the last few months, if you've seen those. Those before this new generation told them to look inwards, not upwards. And they're finding there is nothing there, that secularism is no saviour. And so now we find ourselves in two worlds at once. On the one hand, people with a new openness to spiritual things, perhaps. On the other hand, people still convinced we already have all we need in ourselves and in the certainties of secularism. And in that kind of divided world, is there anything else we can do apart from more guessing, more arguing, more dividing? Well, in the reading that we heard from John just a few moments ago, John sums up his message in the final verse, the final paragraph there. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory. And the word there is referring to God the Son, to Jesus, who was with God in the beginning, before creation. And this verse is telling us two things. It's telling us that we don't need to keep guessing what God is like, because he has stepped in to our reality. But more than that, it's telling us that he's done that. He's stepped in the most surprising of ways by becoming flesh. It would be far less surprising to hear that God had arrived as a superhero or as a general or something like that, but instead he arrives in a borrowed manger. And the word flesh deliberately emphasizes fragility, vulnerability. The point is, not only has God stepped into the world so we know who he is, we can also know that he knows what it's like to be us. In 1863, a missionary who was known as Father Damien moved to a leper colony in Hawaii. Now, leprosy, of course, is a highly communicable disease, which is why historically lepers were separated from the rest of society so that they didn't spread their illness. But that didn't put Father Damien off, and inspired by the example of Jesus, he lived among them. He ate with them. He touched them. One Sunday, though, over 20 years after he arrived, he astonished the lepers by beginning his sermon with the words, "We lepers." His ministry to the lepers had not been conducted from a distance. He became one of them. And on an even deeper level, that is what John is describing here in these verses. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. God, in effect, is saying, we humans. And then John adds, we have seen his glory. Now, when we hear the word glory, we tend to think of success and power and being impressive, the opposite of the fragility and vulnerability of flesh. But if you read on through John's gospel, what you find is this: Jesus keeps talking about his hour of glory. It's coming, this hour of glory, he says. But what we find as we read through is the moment that he's talking about is not some great victory parade or some extraordinary miracle. His hour of glory is his death in the most shameful of circumstances, crucified on a cross. The baby in the borrowed manger is heading for a borrowed tomb. And John says that is where the glory of God, his self-giving love, his grace and his truth, do you see that at the end of that paragraph, full of grace and truth? That is where you can see that most clearly. And so in a world that just can't agree on anything, where some are sure Christianity is fading away while others are reviving their interest, well, John isn't just offering another opinion to throw into the poll. He's saying at the cross, God has shown us his glory. That is what he is like. Many today are suspicious of power and authority for understandable reasons. The God we meet here is not just another bully in the sky. His glory is not throwing his weight around. It is laying down his life. In a world where we're told we can't really know anything for sure about God, John is saying God has stepped into the world as a real, fragile human being. And he's given us something, someone to look at. There is no more need for guessing. The question, though, is what we will do with what we see in Jesus. Because it is not automatic that we will recognize him for who he is. So just in the previous paragraph there, John spells that out. He was in the world, in the second sentence there, he was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. His own people did not receive him. And so it's the same today, you see. Many today still miss God in Jesus. They don't see him because he doesn't fit our expectations of what God ought to look like. But John goes on, yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Jesus, who is God in human flesh, offers the opportunity of relationship with God. From God with us comes us with God, if we will receive and believe in him as he asks us to. This, John emphasizes, comes as a gift. Just like we're not asked to guess what God is like because he's come down, we're also not asked to prove that we are good enough to receive him because he has been made flesh and died in his hour of glory at the cross. So all that is left is to receive. Last Christmas, the tiny village of Tiberville, excuse me for my French pronunciation, but the tiny village of Tiberville in Normandy received an unexpected phone call. a 91-year-old retired meteorologist named Roger Tiberville had died in Paris. His only connection to this little village in Normandy was his surname, Tiberville. He'd never visited, so far as anyone could tell, but the mayor of Tiberville, who slightly confusingly was named Guy Paris, as in Paris, the mayor of Tiberville received this phone call explaining that Monsieur Tiberville had bequeathed the village of Tiberville 10 million euros in his will. And as Monsieur Paris of Tiberville digested the news about Monsieur Tiberville of Paris, he assumed it must be some kind of joke. But he soon received proof that the bequest was genuine, and he and all the town, all that they had to do was make preparation to receive this extraordinary amount of money, which was many times the amount of the village's annual budget. And John is saying a similar bequest, an offer has been made to us. God has come from a distance, sharing not just our name, but our flesh, and has died as a man so that we might become children of God. All we need to do is to receive what he is offering. And maybe we're here and we are one of those who is seeking something different, recognizing in this broken world there must be something more. Well, Jesus offers us himself, the Word made flesh. Maybe we're here and we're one of those still skeptical. We're unsure there can be anything real beyond the nostalgia of a traditional Christmas. Well, whichever we are, later in the first chapter of his gospel, John speaks of one follower of Jesus named Philip, talking to his friend Nathanael. And Philip says to Nathanael, "We have found the one Moses wrote about in the law, about whom the prophets wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph." And Nathanael's response is skeptical. Nazareth, can anything good come from there, he says. And, Nathanael is the skeptic who thinks, surely not, there can't be anything in this. And so Philip says, come and see. However convinced or uncertain or seeking we are, that is still the invitation to us this Christmas. The next step might be to take one of the books that we'd love to offer you as a gift when you leave, or to join the course that we're going to run in January called Hope Explored. You can see the details of that at the back of the order of service. We can remain divided on whether Die Hard is a Christmas movie, but one thing is clear. A film like Die Hard tells a very different story from the Christmas story. In Die Hard, the hero saves people by killing the villains. In the Christmas story, in the Christian story, the hero saves the villains by letting himself be killed. And so this Christmas, come closer and see the glory of the Word made flesh.